Right now, America feels like it's boiling over. Politics has become a shouting match. Rhetoric is out of control. The question is, how do we turn the temperature down?
They'll tell you freedom's just a word.
Here with Dr. Ben Carson.
Special friend of mine, Dr. Ben Carson.
Dr. Ben Carson.
Dr. Ben Carson.
Dr. Carson has some answers.
Unless we, the American people, recognize that we're being manipulated for the purpose of destroying our way of life, they will succeed. We're living through a very consequential moment in our nation's history. The Lord situated me in a place where we could get a lot of things done.
God over government, our rights are natural rights.
I would rather be on the side of faith and commitment to God than on the other side.
Me and you, we stand for truth.
It's going to take a long time for the medical profession, particularly the public health sector, to be trusted again after what happened with COVID.
Why are hospitals still shoving these foods down their mouth when they know the damage that it's being done to their patients?
People have lost faith in our public health authorities.
We're going to dig into the world of healthcare because from debates about Tylenol and autism to the dangers of processed foods, Americans have never been more skeptical of the system. How do we expose what's broken but also rebuild trust in medicine and public health?
We the people. Why you quiet? It's time to stand up for the truth. How they coming for our kids, so who gon' stand up for the youth? Ay, and we know we win because Yeshua is the proof. Ay, we the people like Garcia, so that's no excuse.
On today's episode of We the People, we're sitting down with a man who embodies calm in the middle of chaos. Dr. Ben Carson has lived at the highest levels of responsibility, from the operating room to a presidential cabinet. And through it all, he's remained a steady voice for faith, reason, and unity. Right now, America feels like it's boiling over. Politics has become a shouting match. Rhetoric is out of control. The question is, how do we turn the temperature down? Dr. Carson has some answers. We're going to dig into the world of healthcare because from debates about Tylenol and autism to the dangers of processed foods, Americans have never been more skeptical of the system. How do we expose what's broken but also rebuild trust in medicine and public health? And finally, we'll talk about the role faith plays, not just in an operating room where life and death hang in the balance, but in leading a nation that desperately needs healing. This conversation is about civility, truth, and the future of America. Dr. Carson, it's an honor to have you on We the People.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here with you, and I appreciate your patriotism.
So we're going to cover a few different things today. I want to talk about sort of the state that the country's in and how we sort of deal with the level that the temperature's at right now and maybe work to lower it a little bit. I think you're someone that's always been a great voice in that area. But then I obviously want to dive into your expertise in the medical profession and talk about some things there. And then we'll kind of round it out and highlight you as a man of unapologetic faith and the role that that's played. So let's just start where I sort of started that. I do want to talk about civility in public life, because this is something that you yourself have spoken about. And right now it feels like the temperature has never been higher. How do we work to turn the temperature down in this country and actually talk with each other rather than shouting past each other?
Well, I like analogies. When a young woman and a young man decide to get married, they just can't keep their hands off of each other. They have to talk all the time. If one's away, they're on the telephone. And by the time they're ready to get divorced, they don't talk to each other, and their mate becomes the devil incarnate. I'm afraid that's what's happened to us. But unfortunately, I think it's intentional. I think the Marxist element has always wanted to fundamentally change who we are, and they've worked at it very hard. If you look at the congressional record from January the 10th, 1963, Congressman Herlong of Florida read in the 45 goals of communism in America, how they were going to gain control because they can't take care of us militarily, so they have to have another way of doing it. And he derived that information from a book called The Naked Communist by W. Cleon Skousen, who was an FBI agent who spent his whole career studying communists and what they're doing in this country. And one of the 45 goals, gain control of our public institutions of education and teacher unions so that you can indoctrinate the kids. Gain control of the media and Hollywood so that you can change the culture of America. make sexual perversion normal, natural, and healthy so that you could corrupt the morals of our country, denigrate the role of the family, elevate the role of government, remove God from the public square, particularly from schools, and have the churches stop preaching the gospel and start preaching the social gospel, with their finger in the air saying which way the wind is blowing, rather than the scriptures. And that's just a small smattering. If you read the whole group of them, it's pretty impressive. And they've been able to accomplish a lot of this, and including making us think that we're each other's enemies. That's an essential part of what they have to do to accomplish their goals. And so you see them driving wedges between our people on the basis of race, age, income, gender, political affiliation, religion. And unless we, the American people, recognize that we're being manipulated for the purpose of destroying our way of life, they will succeed. If we don't realize that.
So you are a young man, but you've certainly been around longer than I have, and probably a portion of my audience. So I'd like to ask you, in all the wisdom and experience that your years bring, have we been here before? Are there examples from history in our country that maybe you've lived through that we've gotten through, and what lessons can we learn from those times?
Well, McCarthyism. But I'm not 100% sure that the people who saw communists and everything weren't right. They may have carried it a little further than they had evidence to prove. But it's been going on for a long, long time. But I don't think it's been quite this bad since the time of Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War, where you had such divergent opinions. And we also, at that time, similar to now, we didn't want the same things. The South wanted to maintain their slavery because that was a wonderful economic boon for them. And the North had very different ideas about that. And right now, you have a Republican Party who wants to have a country that is people-centric. And you have a Democratic Party who wants to have a government-centric country. It used to be that the Republicans and the Democrats argued vehemently, but they got along together. They had dinner together because they wanted the same thing. They just had different ways of getting there. So that, I think, explains why we have such a dichotomy in the way that we approach things. And it's a very difficult thing to reconcile when you want different things.
Yeah, and the fact that you said this is, we haven't seen something like this since the Civil War is very revealing. I mean, we hear that analogy a lot about what's going on today. It does feel like we're in a civil war. Now, this one is more of a cultural civil war, and while bullets are flying, they're certainly not flying in the manner of hundreds of thousands of soldiers on a battlefield that are citizens of the same country going to war with one another. But what I'd like to hear from you, again, as someone who's got so much perspective of a well-lived life, you know, the younger generation is online, and most of the things online are people yelling at each other. And look, it can be fun, and it serves up great clickbait, and it goes viral. But at the end of the day, I do think that most Americans want to get along with one another. It's much more fun to have friends than enemies. So specifically for a younger generation, what advice would you give to young people who do feel overwhelmed by the anger in politics today?
Well, you know, you're pointing to exactly the area that Charlie Kirk was so effective by asking these young people questions so that they could explore the basis of their beliefs. And that's what we have to do. Otherwise, you just become a victim of propaganda. And you see, it's starting now. I think there's a real revival that's starting in our country because many of the young people have been around long enough to see the direction that we were going in. You know, men in women's sports and everything transgender. And, I don't have anything against people who have alternate thinking about who they are and what they can do. But if you have something that's out of the ordinary, you don't change the whole society to conform with that. You teach the society to be tolerant of it. That's what intelligent people do. And, what we've been doing until very recently is trying to conform to that which is not normal. That doesn't make sense. That's craziness. And I think some of our young people are starting to recognize that. And that was Charlie's goal, and asking the kind of questions that he asked and engaging them in conversation. And it was working, which is why they had to get rid of him.
Hey guys, it's Gates. Thanks for tuning in. I'm asking you to like, share, and subscribe to the show. I hear that all the time when I watch and listen to podcasts. And now that I have a show, I know the difference that it makes. It really does boost us in the algorithm. And the better we do in the algorithm, the better guests we're going to get, the better content we're going to be able to produce. This show is not mine, it's yours. So in a way, you're helping yourself. So please like, share, and subscribe, and God bless.
So, so many people crave unity. This show's called We the People for a reason. I think we have more in common than we have different. And you've said that exact same thing. Where do you see opportunities for unity today? I mean, the easiest way for me to ask you the question is what's the low-hanging fruit out there that we do agree on that we should promote more to bring us together?
Well, everybody thinks that, we should have adequate housing, that we should have good nutrition. The Maha movement has really caught on. And when people see the numbers and are able to look at it over time, see how our life expectancy, which was going up until a few years ago, now is going down, particularly with respect to other industrialized countries. And then we start saying, well, what are we doing that's different? We see at least a third of our population with some kind of chronic disease. This is way out of the ordinary. And I think there's general consensus that we need to really figure out what's going on and deal with it quickly. This can't be a 20-year study. We need to just get to the point. And we already know we don't want to deal with it, but we know that if you eat 3 well-balanced meals a day, drink 6 to 8 glasses of water, get regular exercise and sleep, and don't put harmful substances into your body, you have an enormous advantage. And there are areas around the world called blue zones where you have a large number of people who live to be over 100 years old. And there's one blue zone in the United States. It's in San Bernardino County in California. And of course, Loma Linda University is there, which is populated by Seventh-day Adventists who have a lot of attention to lifestyle. About half of them are vegetarians. They pay very close attention to the way the food is prepared. They believe in exercise and getting proper rest, no drugs, no alcohol. And it's pretty hard to explain why they live so long any other way.
So we can all agree that we want to live longer. We like life and we want to maintain our lives as healthy and as long as possible. I've read the book called The Blue Zones, and it's fascinating how long these communities live based on what they're putting into their body and what they're not putting into their body. And we are going to talk a lot about that very soon. But I want to just ask one more sort of question in the realm of politics. I'm fascinated by the state of the conservative movement, the Republican Party right now. I think that There's sort of two arguments that could be made. I could say it's stronger than ever by looking at sort of Donald Trump and the movement that he's created, maybe our most conservative president of all time, and sort of taking 4 years off and then the people wanting him back. But then I could say that there's some risk, there's some splintering. There are so many brands now of conservatism. There's the alt-right, the new right, the online right, the MAGA right, the traditional right. It doesn't seem like the left divides amongst themselves as much as we do on our side. So what is your take on the state of the conservative movement right now?
Well, I think I've seen some things that are encouraging in that when it was absolutely necessary to conform, they've done it. And that used not to be the case. And one of the things that we have now is a strong leader. President Trump is a very strong leader. He sometimes irritates people. There's no question about that. But he's usually right. And I think people have begun to recognize that. And I think that will help the Republican Party. Another thing that's very helpful to the Republican Party is there is an openness to faith. And that does not seem to be as much the case with the Democratic Party. And, when you stop and you look at the history of our country, it was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. Our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, says that our rights come from our Creator and not from government. You look at the other side, and you had Senator Kane from Virginia a few weeks ago say, no, that's wrong. Our rights don't come from God. They come from government. So you're coming at things from a very different perspective. And I would always rather be on the side of faith and commitment to God than on the other side.
God over government. Our rights are natural rights. The only purpose government should serve is to protect those natural rights that come with God. You're singing to the choir with this audience on that. All right, so I do want to talk about health because to have an opportunity to talk to someone like you with this remarkable career you've had in medicine and continue to have as an outspoken person of the field, there's a lot going on right now. We're sort of looking at these Tylenol studies and people are talking about autism. Vaccines since the COVID pandemic have been all the rage. What is your take on all of this? Where do you fall on this stuff? And Dr. Carson, where do you think autism is coming from? Why do you think we've seen elevated levels of autism?
Well, first of all, recognize that if a few decades ago, we were talking about 1 to 4 in 10,000 being affected by autism spectrum. And now we're talking about 1 in 31. I mean, that is a massive shift. So obviously there is something going on. There may not be a single cause of it. It may be multifactorial. A lot of studies have been done, a lot of correlations made. For instance, couples that have a child later in life, particularly when the man is elderly, there seems to be a significant increase in that situation. It's hard to imagine that some of the things that we're eating don't play a role. And, recently a number of the food companies have come to the table to talk about how they're going to change or how they're not going to be distributing certain things. This is all very promising, but I suspect it's multifactorial. One of the things that I noticed that when I was practicing is a lot of parents would come to me and say, my child has been diagnosed with hyperactivity or one type of hyperactivity. And the pediatrician has recommended that they take Ritalin or some similar substance. And they wanted to know if that was okay given the child's neurologic condition. And I said, it's okay, but before you start it, let's ask a few questions here. Say, can your child watch television? Oh, yeah, they can watch TV all day. Do they play video games? Absolutely, all day long. I said, let's try something. I said, let's have you, over the course of the next few months, wean your child off of the television and the video games and substitute time with you, reading and discussing the material. And when I see you in 3 months, let's talk about whether they still need it. A large number of them came back, said the kid was a brand new kid and it didn't need it. So I imagine some of the electronic input that is so prevalent. I see all these statistics about how many hours kids are spending on these things. I imagine that has something to do with it too. So there's probably a number of factors that we need to pay attention to.
So that's fascinating because, we often hear about screens and kids, and screen time has become, an ugly word, and rightfully so. I have 3 young kids and we're managing the same things. But we hear more about, what they're watching and what it's doing to their, thoughts and emotions and all that. But you are a pediatric neurosurgeon. I think what you're saying there is a neurological component. It's almost like a stimulant to their brain. And you think that while we're all talking about food and that's important, there are neurological effects that the screens are doing to kids' brains?
Absolutely. I mean, what do you do as soon as a kid can sit up? You stick them in front of the TV as their babysitter. A couple of years later, they have some dexterity. We give them the controls to the video games. Zip, 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 zoom, zoom, zoom. I'm turning to something every few seconds. And now they're 5 or 6, and you put them in school, and the teacher's not turning to something every few seconds. You think they're going to pay attention? A lot of them are not.
Yeah, I think I could have better phrased it as we've been focusing on the message, but you're saying let's focus on the medium that's delivering that message and what it's doing. That right there is fascinating. There's been some talk that the levels of autism are up because we're categorizing so many things now as on the autism spectrum. Is there some truth to that?
Yes, we've divided it into. If we get enough divisions, we'll probably be able to put everybody into one of them at some point.
Fair enough. So back to this, not necessarily this screen thing, but, like I said, I'm a parent of 3 young children. A lot of my audience are parents. A big theme of this show is takeaways. I like to give my audience something to take away from each episode and go actually implement and make meaningful changes in their lives. What are some practical ways that parents can protect their kids' nervous system? I think we just covered a major one, but what are some of the other ways?
Well, first of all, recognize that the brain is an incredible organ system. It has billions and billions of neurons and hundreds of billions of interconnections. It remembers everything you've ever seen, everything you've ever heard. It's all in there. We can take an old man and put little depth electrodes in to the temporal area, into the memory function areas, and he can quote back to you a newspaper article he read 60 years ago.
Wow.
Verbatim. So recognize that everything that's going in there stays there and can have an impact on your child. That's very important. And then by the same token, make sure you put the right things in there. The Bible says in Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Well, guess what? The Marxists say that also. It was Vladimir Lenin who said, "Give me your children to teach for 4 years, and the seed that I sow will never be uprooted." So that's very good advice for parents in terms of making sure the right things are put in there. One of the things that we did with our kids as they were growing up, we would have dinner, and before we ate, we all sat down at the table, and everybody would tell a fact that nobody else was likely to know. So they had to do a little bit of research, but it got to be so much fun. Everybody looked forward to giving their fact, and it was fun too.
I like that. Yeah, there's two sides of that coin. It's what's put in and it's what's not put in. And as parents, I mean, we have a large amount of control over that. Not all of it. They go to school, they go to friends' houses, they go out into the world. But, you know, we often say on this show that culture starts at the kitchen table. You just mentioned stories and facts at the kitchen table. I mean, we have a responsibility here as parents to do the work to raise these kids up right so they will not depart. So in the theme of having kids, we're having another one. My wife has a baby coming on Christmas, and so I will be back in the hospital with her. And Dr. Carson, hospitals frustrate the hell out of me. For all the talk we hear about how damaging processed foods are and how you should eat a nutrient-dense diet of as little processed foods as possible, eat foods in their natural state. Every time I'm in a hospital, all they're doing is giving patients processed foods. They give you bags of pretzels and all this and that. Why are hospitals still shoving these foods down their mouth when they, better than anybody, know the damage that it's being done to their patients?
Well, you know, it's very interesting. If you go back a little more than 100 years in Battle Creek, Michigan, the Battle Creek Sanitarium didn't do that. They had a tremendous emphasis on the right kinds of foods and natural foods, non-processed foods. John Harvey Kellogg, everybody knows that name. He was one of the founders of that institute. And people came from all over the world, kings and princes, as well as senators, United States presidents. They went to the Battle Creek Sanitarium where they got the natural foods, the natural processes in terms of the exercising and getting the circulation of the body moving. And it made a big difference. And unfortunately, we've forgotten those lessons and we go for convenience and the almighty dollar. And I think it's time to turn that around. I think it's starting already. The first thing we have to do is begin to recognize that it is a problem. And I think that's happening right now. And it's actually very encouraging to me because I've been sort of a freak about making sure that I eat the right things for a long time. Doesn't mean that I don't enjoy an occasional ice cream cone. But just paying close attention to what goes in, because you are what you eat.
So what really frustrates me is I walk into a hospital and I see a McDonald's in the cafeteria. I see a partnership with Coca-Cola. What happened to first do no harm? How did these big food corporations get such in bed with these hospitals? And what can we, the people, do about that?
Money. That's the answer. It's all about money. And can we raise our voices and insist on healthy alternatives? We can. And people are starting to listen. I think you are finding health diets, gluten-free diets, all kinds of vegetarian options that you never used to see. It's becoming much more popular. Interestingly enough, the whole area of meat substitutes is growing, and tofu. And when you get them to the point where they taste really good, that's going to be a giant leap forward.
Yeah, that's important. That's an important part of the equation. The food should taste good. If the food tastes good, it'll encourage more people to eat it. Exactly. All right, so we've kind of torn down some of these institutions in healthcare, but I do want to build them back up and restore a little bit of trust. I think that a majority of Americans at different times have lost trust in the healthcare industry. Conservatives certainly lost trust during COVID, and now it seems like anything that comes out of the Trump administration regarding healthcare, the left wants nothing to do with. So Dr. Carson, how do we rebuild trust in the healthcare industry?
We have to be honest and very transparent. It's going to take a long time for the medical profession, particularly the public health sector, to be trusted again after what happened with COVID. And then what happened subsequently with the medical profession going along with mutilating the bodies of children and hormonal manipulation, many times without the knowledge of the parents, that they would do something like that, knowing what they know, because medical people know that the human brain doesn't complete its maturation until the mid to late 20s. So when you're telling 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old kids, you may not actually be a girl. You may not actually be a boy without their parents' knowledge. That is child abuse. And that the medical profession would involve themselves in that is very lucrative. That has really, I think, done a lot of damage. And we have to talk about it.
So as a pediatric neurosurgeon, or just in general, what medical breakthroughs currently or maybe on the horizon are you most excited about?
The use of AI, because it allows you to analyze an enormous amount of data and do correlations. You know, you have to think way back to the turn of the century, not the most recent one, but the one before that. The average life expectancy was 57 years. And now it's approaching 80. The biggest difference being that we started to integrate facts into treatment rather than just, oh, I believe it's this, I believe it's that. And AI allows you to gather those facts much faster than we ever could before. One of the reasons that the Human Genome Project was so effective was the beginning of AI-type analyses, where you could go through, just tons of material, quickly make the correct correlations. And that's just getting better with time. And it will allow us to eliminate certain diseases. Also, we're getting much better at being able to delete abnormal portions of a protein and insert corrective forces. Now, that's probably going to result in some things that maybe we didn't intend, but I think it will make an enormous difference for, cystic fibrosis, all kinds of diseases that could be detected and cured at a very early stage.
So, Dr. Carson, I want to talk about the American dream, because a lot of people say the American dream is dead. And I think you are the embodiment of the American dream, from poverty to Johns Hopkins to a presidential run to working in a presidential administration. How do you convince people, specifically younger people, that the American dream is alive and well?
Well, I tell them what happened with me and with a lot of other people. What you have to do is convince them that they're not a victim, that the person who has the most to do with what happens to them is them. It's not somebody else. It's not some obstacle. And my mother, even though she had less than a third grade education, came from a horrible background, a huge rural family in Tennessee, less than a third grade education, got married at age 13, discovered that her husband was a bigamist. Had everything that was negative that anybody could think of. She never allowed herself to be a victim. And that was really the key, is she never allowed us to be victims. If we ever had an excuse about anything, the next thing out of her mouth was a poem called Yourself to Blame. And we didn't want to do that poem, so we stopped making excuses. And if you're not looking for an excuse, then you're looking for a solution. And, think about this country, and you think about all the inventions in the late 19th and throughout the 20th century, and how by far the largest portion of them came out of this country, because we created an environment of can-doism as opposed to what can you do for me-ism. What a difference it makes on an individual level and in a nation. And we are unfortunately fighting against the what can you do for me-ism. And that's why Mamdani is doing so well in New York. I'm going to give you free bus fare and free food and free this and free that and the other. Well, this goes back to being well educated. Go and read about Castro. And what he said in the beginning sounded very much like Mamdani. And that's been the case almost every place around the world. Look at Venezuela. I remember going to Venezuela a number of times before they turned. It was a beautiful place. A lot of people, middle class, beautiful markets and museums. And look what's happened to them in a very short period of time. They've gone from the wealthiest country in South America to the bottom of the heap. And it only takes about a decade to do that when you adopt these socialist ideals.
Yeah, I love your line. If you're not looking for excuses, you're looking for solutions. I love that. I might print that out and frame that and put that in the studio. So tell me about the American Cornerstone Institute. What problems are you tackling there, and what solutions are you advancing?
Well, when I completed my term as the HUD secretary, I was looking forward to retirement, because I had failed retirement the first time. I was going to retire after I finished my neurosurgical career. I said, this time I'm going to get it right. But, it didn't take long after seeing the direction that the Biden administration was taking the country. I said, I couldn't enjoy playing golf and cruising around the world and watching my country go down the tubes. So myself and some very talented people from HUD got together and created American Cornerstone Institute, which focuses on the cornerstone principles that made us into a great country. That would be our faith, which taught us how to relate to each other. Our Judeo-Christian values say, love your neighbor, not hate your neighbor, not cancel your neighbor if they disagree with you. And then the concept of liberty, what freedom really is, and why it's so important to protect it. And then the concept of community. That was a huge portion of our success as a nation early on. You had people from different countries. They spoke different languages, but they understood one very important thing. It's called the common good. What's good for all of us. And you heard that phrase frequently from our founders. It's key. And, if somebody fell out of a tree during harvest time and broke his leg, everybody else would harvest his crops. They didn't want to know what his religion was or what his political affiliation was. They just knew he was their neighbor and they needed help. That was a tremendous aid to us as our country developed and grew. And then the concept of life, from the womb to the tomb, honoring life. And as we got further away from that, look what happened to our relationships with each other. And this is a time when we really need to maybe take a glance backward and see what were the things that really made us different and unique and characterize our country and its tremendous upward trajectory. And then we have a pediatric component called Little Patriots. Because a country cannot be successful if its constituents are not patriotic, don't love their country, and are not willing to fight for it. And we have Star Spangled Adventures, which is a cartoon. Each cartoon is about 7 or 8 minutes long, and it highlights one aspect of our history. And they're done in a way that virtually every little kid, after he sees one, wants to see the next one. And we're actually producing a feature-length film. But they're available at littlepatriotslearning.com and also at americancornerstone.org. And we also have an executive branch program in which we teach college students and others who are interested how the government actually works. How does a bill get started? How does it carry through? All the things that you hear about but you don't really know about. And we have a series called My American Story, where we interview people who came from Marxist colleges, Marxist countries, and the things that they had to face and how they struggled to get to America, and the things that they saw or are seeing now, which are alarm bells and that we should pay attention to. And we have lots of white papers, and we have all kinds of stuff. It's very entertaining if you go to americancornerstone.org. Probably more entertaining than HBO.
Well, Dr. Carson, now I'm trying to keep my kids off of screens, but I think I will make an exception for Star Spangled Adventures. That sounds very appealing. And, you know, you talked about the kids and raising little patriots. Our kids are the succession plan for America.
Exactly.
And we're sort of the leadership that they rely on to bring them up. It's like any great company. I mean, when you start out at a company, you're part of that succession plan, but you're a product of that environment that you're brought up through that company in. And I love what you're doing at American Cornerstone Institute because it's laying that foundation and building that succession plan of little patriots to lead this country in the future.
And all those programs that I just mentioned are free of charge.
Okay, wow.
You look at them, you say, wow, this must have cost a lot of money. Well, it did cost a lot of money, but we have patriotic Americans who paid for it.
That's right. Donors. The philanthropic world does some amazing things in the conservative movement. All right, just a couple more questions for you. I'd like to sort of jump in to the operating room or a cabinet meeting in the administration. I mean, you've been on a presidential debate stage before. Which role in your life has brought the heaviest sense of responsibility? And I'd also like to know what role your faith has played in those situations.
Well, my faith has been essential to every aspect of my life. My career before medicine, my career during medicine, getting into political arena, which I never intended to do, by the way. If you had asked me 15 years ago about being in politics, I would have said, you're crazy. Do that. But the Lord has a way of changing that for you. And there were so many cases, neurosurgical cases, very, very difficult cases, where I really called upon God to give me wisdom, to know what to do. There were some things that were very rare, and, no one really had a long record of dealing with them. And you're so like a pioneer in those situations. I had to call upon the Lord in many of those cases. And in the political world, there's a lot of people who don't necessarily have your best interests at heart. And you don't want to become embittered and seek revenge. That's where God can be very helpful to you. that you just sort of brush that aside and focus on what really needs to be done. I was, for instance, convinced when I took over as the HUD secretary that this should be an easy thing to get bipartisan cooperation. I said, everybody wants people to have a place to live and to climb the ladder and experience the American dream. Not true. There were many people who are very happy to have people dependent upon them. And that's where they derive their power base. And fighting with those people was not something that I had planned to do, but I had to do, unfortunately.
Yeah, power in politics is the currency, but I think you and I know that the all-powerful God is has the final word, and I rely on him a lot too, especially with this show, raising my kids. Just seeking his wisdom is a nice, or seeking his ability to give you the wisdom is the way I think you put it. And we can pray and ask God a lot of things, but I think wisdom, judgment are things that we should rely on God for more. So
I think he also has a sense of humor.
I know he does in my life.
You have to deal with us, but you know, I was a very angry kid. Sometimes I would get into a lot of trouble because of that. And I tried to stab someone when I was 14, and they had on a knife, had a buckle on their belt, which is very large, and the clothing was over it, and the knife blade struck the buckle and broke. But it was through that experience that I did a lot of praying, and I started that very day reading from the book of Proverbs, which has so much wisdom in it. And Proverbs, of course, was written by Solomon. Well, my middle name happens to be Solomon. So God knew that I was going to have that attachment. But when Solomon became the king of Israel, I remember what happened that brought him great fame. 2 women came to him claiming to be the mother of the same babies. And what did he do? He advocated dividing the baby. Well, that's when I became very famous, when I divided babies.
That is providential. That's divine. You called it a sense of humor. I think it's greater than that, but that's fascinating. So, okay, 14-year-old Ben Carson stabbing someone. If you could sit down with a young Ben Carson growing up in Detroit, or maybe even a 20 or 30-year-old Ben Carson, what would you tell that man about perseverance, purpose, life?
Well, you know, I would say develop that relationship with God. That's the key to success. And when you stop and think about it, God took the knife out of an angry teenager that was used to harm people and replaced it with a scalpel to save lives. He's a pretty cool guy. I had Alex Jones on here, the founder of the Hallow app, which has had more prayers downloaded than any other prayer app in the history of the world. And we were saying that praying is cool. Now we've got Ben Carson on the show saying God is cool. So we've checked a couple cool boxes there. The theme of this show when it first started was to make conservatism cool again. So that word keeps coming up. I love hearing it from you. All right, I'll get you out of here on this, Dr. Carson. You're such a positive, hopeful man. And there's a lot of darkness and negativity in the country, but I'm hopeful for the future of this country. What gives you hope about the future of America? Oh, that's a long answer because there's so many things. But most recently, you know, at the Charlie Kirk funeral, there were 90 to 100,000 people there. And at his follow-up turn point session this week, there were 6,500 kids there. That tells me that something is happening. There's an awakening that's going on in our country. And I hope that people won't, in a month or so, just turn around and start doing the same things again. And I don't think they will. I think this is the beginning of a major change. We've had 3 or 4 revivals in our country before, and we needed them. And we certainly need it right now. And I think it's happening. And I'm very encouraged by it. And I want people to realize that we are not enemies. Take the first letter of each one of those words, W-A-N-E. We are not enemies. Wane. We've let hatred and division wax for a long time. Now it's time to let it wane. And recognize that just because somebody disagrees with you, it doesn't make them your enemy. And you can learn a lot more from somebody you disagree with than from somebody who agrees with you on everything. And we just need to put the hatchets away, realize that we're not each other's enemies, that there are people who are manipulating us to make us think we're enemies. We agree on probably 80 to 90% of things. We let them take that 10% or 20% and stir the pot with it and make you think that it's the most important thing when it really is not. It's our relationship with each other, which is much more important than that.
Well, Dr. Carson, you have just lived a life full of service, and I thank you for your leadership. I hope all of us walk in the path that you have paved for us. Keep up the good fight. No one rivals you when it comes to civility, hope, and optimism and positivity. So stay in the fight for us all, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for being a patriot.
We the people. Why you quiet? It's time to stand up for the truth. How they coming for our kids, so who gon' stand up for the youth? Ay, and we know we win because Yeshua is the proof. Ay, we the people like Garcia, so that's no excuse.